Hey guys, if you've been in our shop before and bought a reptile from us, you know that we try to make sure our customers are educated as much as possible on the care of the new pet they're going to get. Now there's some great first steps you can take to make sure you're ready for the pet you're planning to get, and that's what today's video is going to be all about. Here are the 5 most important things to consider before getting a pet reptile. Number 1, how big the animal will get. It might look small now, but when it grows up, it might be huge. Will you be able to handle it once it gets bigger and have enough room for it? For example, many people see baby sulcata tortoises in shops and think, oh, what a cute little tortoise, not realizing in a matter of years, you will end up with a giant tortoise that is over 100 pounds and needs a gigantic enclosure. The same with some snakes like Burmese pythons. It might look small as a baby, but grow up to potentially be 18 feet long at maturity. Are you ready for an animal that big? Number 2, what size of an enclosure the reptile needs. Do you have room to house your pet reptile with a properly sized enclosure? Too often, people get enclosures for their reptiles that are too small, especially if they're getting them as babies and don't realize they will quickly outgrow small tanks. And for some animals, like the aforementioned sulcata tortoises and Burmese pythons, there are no commercially available tanks big enough that you can just go buy at some store for them. You usually end up needing a custom-built enclosure. Sometimes you even have to dedicate whole rooms for them, like we do for our green iguana. Number 3, what the animal is going to eat. Are you ready for a pet that's going to be eating live insects or live or frozen thawed rodents? Besides strict herbivores, most reptiles are going to be eating one of those foods at some point, and you need to be able to feed them. So if you're pretty squeamish about live insects or rodents, you probably don't want to get a pet reptile that's either an omnivore or a carnivore. And are you ready for the cost of feeding? Some reptiles, like bearded dragons, eat a lot, and you will have to spend more money to feed them each week than you would on an animal like a snake that only eats once a week. And then for your herbivores, if you get like a huge herbivore like a sulcata tortoise, your bill for their food is going to be a lot more than it would be for one that is smaller. Number 4, the amount of care the animal will require. Each reptile at our store requires you to take time each day to take care of them. Some have care that is simpler than others do. A great example is snakes versus lizards. With lizards, you have to feed them more often and spot clean their cages every day, whereas with snakes, they eat only about once a week and make less of a mess. Some animals have more complicated lighting requirements than others that require you to keep track of it more often and spend more time on their care. You also have to be able to commit the time and money for your reptile if it ends up getting sick or injured, just like you would with any other pet. And finally, number 5, how handleable the animal is. If handling your pet reptile is important to you, you need to educate yourself on what species do best with handling. For example, you wouldn't want to get a pet tokay gecko if you want to handle your pet. These guys are notorious for their bad temper and inclination to bite. You'll want to stick with a species that is known to be handleable, like bearded dragons or crested geckos. Now you should also realize that unlike dogs and cats, pet reptiles aren't huge snugglers. They don't show as much affection as dogs and cats do, and if you want a pet that you can snuggle up with and everything, a pet reptile may not be for you. They just sort of hang out with you more than anything. Hopefully, after watching this video, you'll have a good idea on how to prepare and educate yourself before you pick out your new pet reptile. As with any pet, it's a great idea to look up their care and requirements before taking them home and getting your home prepared for their arrival beforehand. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time.